Commodity prices for cocoa have tumbled, and Swiss chocolate maker Barry Callebaut is feeling the pinch. Its shares fell 15% after it cut guidance, and it expects earnings before interest and tax to fall by a mid-teens percentage. The company cited supply chain disruption linked to war in the Middle East. Analysts say there's also a structural change going on as the rise of those GLP-1 weight loss drugs change consumer appetites for chocolate. Retail prices remain pretty high into Easter as manufacturers tried to rebuild margins, but may now have room to fall. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa is a network of organisations and people working to shift New Zealand's economy towards well-being rather than just growth. The group is exploring how New Zealand could bring long-term thinking into government decision-making, and joining me now to discuss that is Gareth Hughes, Director of WEAll, or WEAll. How do you say it, Gareth?
WEAll. Good morning.
WEAll. Gareth, what sort of problems do you think are the most pressing ones that you're trying to solve here?
Well, look, the economy just isn't delivering well-being for people or planet. We've been myopically focused on growing GDP growth, but actually over that period, the number of kids growing up in poverty has increased. Our inequality has gone up. We actually need to look at real long-term solutions for intergenerational well-being. As an independent, non-partisan think and do tank, we're part of a global network, and we've been looking around the world, looking at New Zealand for good policies that can really drive well-being for people and planet.
So what sort of things have you picked up? I heard you've been travelling in the Northern Hemisphere a little bit into Scotland and particularly. What's taken your fancy there?
Well, Scotland was interesting. They've recently unanimously in their parliament passed an act to promote community wealth building. This is an economic development strategy which asks, how can we actually keep wealth circulating locally? How can we make sure profits stay locally, maybe through worker-owned cooperatives? I was also in the north of England where the city of Preston is the flagship. They're actually driving good incomes, keeping money circulating locally. The model in New Zealand is we look overseas, we look out of region to try and find someone to solve our problems. In Scotland, they're actually looking at their own local solutions.
Is a lot of this just about tax structures effectively and just kind of reshaping things, or is there some other kind of element that's going on?
Well, clearly our tax system in Aotearoa, New Zealand, isn't fit for purpose. It's not balanced, it's not fair, it's putting the burden on people working rather than wealth. We've polled New Zealanders, and what we know is 2/3 of Kiwis want the super wealthy to be contributing more towards our tax system.
Yeah. I guess if you look at concrete measures, though, we've already got some changes that have happened here. There was a change to the public sector discount rates, if we can get right into the weeds there, a couple of years ago, that basically mean when Treasury is looking at stuff, it can say if it's for a social project rather than a commercial project, it applies a lower discount rate, so the future value of that investment actually goes up. It makes it more likely. Are things like that more useful than trying to import another policy from overseas and just sort of seeing how that runs?
Well, I think it's an and we need to remember our use of discount rates, and I'm a massive geek for this stuff, so I love getting into the weeds of it. The United Kingdom's been doing this for more than a decade before we looked at it. So yes, we need to look at the good ideas, but also I'd love the idea that we could be sharing good ideas around the world. The problem with our old unsophisticated use of discount rates meant we just didn't we were discounting the interest of future generation. That made investing in long-term infrastructure harder under the old fiscal models we used. I know MB looked at the Tūhoe Māori economy as a bit of an example when they were looking at the review, and Tūhoe described that we don't discount our future generations, they're present to us today. And I think that's a really good approach when we're looking at long-term infrastructure, be it bridges, public transport networks, or electricity grids.
I understand you're quite keen on what sort of creating another, I've got to say it sounds a little bit like another bureaucrat, a future commissioner, someone who can speak for the future. We've already got a parliamentary commissioner for the environment, we've got a children's commissioner, we've got all these people in all these offices. What does having effectively one more bureaucrat add to the mix?
Well, look, New Zealand's been terrible. I think we can all agree on that at long-term thinking and thinking of intergenerational equity. You're right, we do have a bunch of commissioners, but we have no one in our institutional system to advocate for future generations. Wales, where I was also researching last year, had the world's first Future Generations Commissioner. That's being followed by the United Nations, the European Union. Australia's got legislation for that. The difference, what Wales did is they empowered their commissioner to have real power in the system so they can do good things and stop bad things. The Welsh also did it differently. They ran effectively like a citizens' assembly, a mass civic participation engagement process to develop 7 goals for that country, which the commissioner was responsible for. So I love the idea that we could actually go to citizens, ask them what's important, what their goals for New Zealand could be, and have a champion in the system to actually ask, are we on track to deliver well-being for future generations?
Sounds like you should have stuck around in Parliament if you're really keen to push this stuff forward there, Gareth.
Well, what I found in Parliament is there's very little time or incentive for deep systemic thought. So much of our politics, to be frank, is focused on the retail, the short term. I've seen successive governments kick the can down the road. It's a privilege now to be working with experts, with researchers and economists to come up with long-term policy solutions. So our blueprint for prosperity, we've identified 10 big missions for New Zealand. We've got 33 policies, which are real systemic levers that actually can turn the ship around.